A very warm welcome to all the students. In last lecture, we discussed about the anterior-most opening of the alimentary canal, which is bounded by mouth, followed by oral cavity, including hard palate, soft palate, vestibule, tongue, and teeth with their detailed structure and function. In this topic, we will be discussing about neck structures which follow the oral cavity, that includes pharynx, Waldeyr's ring, esophagus, stomach with its three-part cardiac fundus and pylorus, and also we'll be discussing about small intestine with its three parts, jejunum, duodenum, and ileum. So in this lecture, we'll be discussing about pharynx, Waldeyr's ring, esophagus, stomach, different parts of stomach, and small intestine. Pharynx. The oral cavity leads into pharynx, which serves as a common passage for food and air. It has three parts, namely nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx, which are these three parts: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Nasopharynx is situated behind the nasal chambers. So these are your nasal chambers, and nasopharynx is situated exactly behind it. It serves as the passage for air only. This is MCQ question. Which of the following three parts of the pharynx serves for the passage for air? So the answer is nasopharynx. It bears opening of the eustachian tube. So eustachian tube is present somewhere here. This is the eustachian tube, and it bears its opening into the pharynx. Oropharynx. It is the common passage for food and air situated behind the buccal cavity. Since this region is situated directly behind the buccal cavity, so it serves as a common passage for food as well as air. Again, MCQ question. Laryngopharynx. It is the most inferior, that is the lowest part of the pharynx, leads into larynx in front and esophagus behind. The esophagus and trachea opens into pharynx. So both of these, they open into pharynx. Cartilaginous flap called epiglottis prevents the entry of food into the glottis, which is opening of windpipe during swallowing. So this is MCQ question. What is the function of epiglottis? So the answer is it prevents the entry of food into the glottis. What is glottis? It is the opening of windpipe during swallowing, so that the food does not get stuck into the windpipe. Waldeyr's ring. The lymphatic tissue of both the pharynx and the oral cavity are arranged in a ring-like manner, and this arrangement is known as Waldeyr's ring. This ring consists of nasopharyngeal tonsils or the pharyngeal tonsils, tubal tonsils, palatine tonsils, and lingual tonsils, arranged in a ring-like manner. So nasopharyngeal tonsils or the pharyngeal tonsils, these are present on the posterior wall of the nasopharynx. So they are present on the posterior wall of the nasopharynx. In children, they become enlarged and are known as adenoid. This is important MCQ question. What is adenoid? So the swelling of nasopharyngeal tonsils or the pharyngeal tonsils is referred to as adenoid, and it is often confused with tonsillitis, which is the swelling or infection of the palatine tonsils. This is again MCQ question. So the next is the tubal tonsils. These are present in the pharyngeal part of the tongue, the posterior most part of the tongue, near the opening of the eustachian tube. These are known as tubal tonsils. Palatine tonsils or pharyngeal tonsils. These are often infected, leading to sore throat, and this condition is known as tonsillitis. Again, important MCQ question. Lingual tonsils. These are irregular lymphoid nodules, as we can all see in the diagram, on the pharyngeal or the posterior most part of the tongue. All these lymphoid tissues are active in production of immunoglobulin. And why do we require this Waldeyr's ring structure or all these lymphoid tissue? Because they are active in production of immunoglobulin, which helps fight diseases. Esophagus, the next structure which follows the mouth, the oral cavity and the pharynx, Waldeyr's ring, is the esophagus, this long part. It is about 25 centimeters long. It lies behind trachea, as we can all see. The front part is the trachea, and this tube lying behind trachea is referred to as esophagus, and it is the exclusive passage for the movement of food from the oral cavity to the J-shaped structure known as stomach. It lies behind trachea and heart. Thin long tube extending posteriorly, passing through neck, the thorax region, the diaphragm, opening into stomach at a sharp angle. The outermost covering is tunica adventitia. This is MCQ question. The anterior 1/3 have skeletal muscles, and the posterior 2/3 of the esophagus is lined by smooth muscles. Muscular sphincter regulates the opening of esophagus into the stomach, and this sphincter is known as the gastroesophageal sphincter. This sphincter helps prevent the food to fall back or flowing back towards the oral cavity. Also, the anterior 1/3 muscles have skeletal muscles, and the rest of the esophagus, the posterior 2/3, will have smooth muscle, indicate that the peristaltic movement occurs mostly in 1/3 region of the esophagus as compared to the rest of the 2/3 of the esophagus lined by the smooth muscles. Stomach. It is the widest part of the alimentary canal, J-shaped, bag-like, located in the upper left part of the abdominal cavity. Gastric rugae are seen in empty stomach. This is MCQ question. Where are gastric rugae seen? So they are seen in the empty stomach. Depending upon the content of the food remains in our stomach for about 1 to 6 hours. Carbohydrate food remain in stomach for about 1 to 2 hours, whereas protein food remains in stomach for 2 to 3 hours. Fatty food remain in stomach for 3 to 6 hours. Different parts of stomach. So this is a rough diagram representing different parts of the stomach. Stomach contain 3 main regions: the fundus, the uppermost part, the cardiac part lying below the fundus, and pylorus, the lobed part of the stomach. So fundus, it is the dome-shaped part of the stomach left to cardiac sphincter. So cardiac sphincter is present here and is filled with gases. So this all of the part of fundus of stomach is filled with gases. Cardiac, it is the broader part where esophagus, this is esophagus, joins the stomach. Esophageal aperture is surrounded by gastroesophageal cardiac sphincter. So a sphincter is present at this junction, which is known as gastroesophageal or cardiac sphincter. The failure of the sphincter to relax causes eclasia cardia, that is the reflex of all the material of the stomach through this area due to lack of the ability of the sphincter to relax is ectasia cardia. Pylorus, the distal lower part of the stomach. On the right side, it has three main parts called the antrum, the canal, and a sphincter. So it has got a narrow canal, a wide antrum, and a sphincter around an opening which opens into the duodenum. So the next part which follows the stomach is duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. Small intestine. So it is the longest part of the alimentary canal. This is again MCQ question. With 6.25 meters of length and is supported by a peritoneal membrane called mesentery. So mesentery is a thin layer which supports all the organ, keeping it in one place. Small intestine has got three parts: duodenum, the U-shaped part; jejunum, the long highly coiled middle portion; and ileum, the highly coiled part. So the opening of the stomach into duodenum is guarded by pyloric sphincter. So when duodenum opens, when the stomach opens up into duodenum, it is guarded by the pyloric sphincter. This is again MCQ question. What is the location of the pyloric sphincter? It is at the opening of the stomach into the duodenum. Walls of jejunum and ileum has circular or spiral internal fold called the folds of Kerckring or valvulae conventis or plica circularis. So the walls of jejunum and ileum have internal folds, and these internal folds are referred to as the folds of Kerckring, valvulae conventis, and plica circularis. The luminal surface area is increased by the presence of plica circularis, villi of intestinal wall, and microvilli of epithelial cell. This is a very important MCQ question. Luminal surface area is basically the area used for the absorption of nutrient from the substance. So it is increased by plica circularis, villi of intestinal wall, and microvilli of the epithelial cell. These three helps in the increase of the luminal area of the small intestine. Parts of small intestine. So talking about the duodenum, which is the first part, the U-shaped part. It is also known as the proximal part. It is 25 centimeters long, U-shaped, this part, and the walls are thin. Villi which are present here are leaf-like and broad. This is again MCQ question. Plica circularis are fewer and Pier's patch are absent in this. We'll be talking about Pier's patch soon. Jejunum, it is also known as the middle part. This highly coiled middle part is referred to as jejunum. It is about 2.5 meter long and 5 centimeters wide. Walls are thicker. The walls of this area are very thick, more vascular for better absorption. Villi are thick and tongue-like. Plica circularis are best developed, and Pier's patches are absent in this area. This is again MCQ question. Where are the Pier's patches absent? So the answer is jejunum. Ileum, known as the posterior part, it is about 3.5 meter long, 3.5 centimeters wide. Walls are thin and less vascular. Villi are thin and finger-like. Plica circularis are less developed in this region, and Pier's patches are present. And this is a very important diagram with respect to your subjective as well as objective exams, and mostly a diagram will be given to you and you'll be told to fill the marked areas.